I'm excited that you're here, in part because I've been working on this article that you'll get a snippet about throughout the next hour or so. We do need to get out of here by 1 o'clock because it's a class, but I am ready to sort of engage. So I have a couple of lives over the last 32 years. Half of those, the first 16 years were spent in a bilingual classroom. And so I thought that I would be the best bilingual teacher ever. And then I kept going to school and got my BA, and then went on to got multiple credentials, and then I went and I was interested in reading and got a master's in reading. And then I was interested in applied linguistics and the nature of second language learning, and I got a Ph.D. in applied educational linguistics with a focus on language and literacy. And then the last 16 years I've been here, and it's been fascinating in a number of ways. Let me start with the title. The title came from this qualitative research where I went into a classroom and I observed two kindergarten students for a year. And I would go in there at least every 3 weeks and spend most of the day, every 3 to 5 weeks over the course of a 36, 37 week school year. And I wanted to study the phenomenon of success. So I identify success as an issue. What is it that makes someone successful? And because I was fascinated with language, when you're talking about something, you're talking about the opposite as well, meaning failure, right? Although and this is part of this paper that that it will go out over the course of this year and to be published somewhere. The paper is intricate and it's based on this research. So I followed two kids, and the way I started was by asking the teacher to identify a child who was successful, and then a child who was not as successful. And I was grappling with my language, because if I would say, give me your kid who's your failure, right? That would predispose the teacher. So as I went in there at the beginning of the school year, I didn't want her, and she never did, to ask me what I meant by success. She never did. And I did it in a way where I didn't want her to do this, because she was also part of this research. And then I said, well, give me a kid who is not like that. And the title to this article came at the end of that year when I was interviewing the teacher about what I had done over the course of the entire year. And I said, well, let's talk about your successful student. And she says, well, she didn't know, because she had never asked me all year long. I had a relationship of trust with her that I was hoping never would she ever ask me throughout the year, as I would come in there and spend the day, even to the point where I would pick up some of the kids and walk them with their mom to school, and did all kinds of, this would be called ethnographic research, because I would also spend time in the community and do all kinds of things. So at the end, as I'm interviewing, and I even have a clip from the teacher where she says, well, what do you mean success? And then I said, well, your favorite. And I said it in Spanish, tu favorito. And this is when she says, well, I'm sure you also have your favorites. Hence the title to this article, right? So I went in there and looked at the successful kid. I recorded, I even did what is known as discourse analysis, meaning I would transcribe the language that they were using, and using transcription theory that is used in sociolinguistics to be able to put it in context. And so this was a fascinating, but also really sad research, because you're talking about real kids, that what we do or fail to do as teachers affects them in different ways, right? So this is by the way, those are not the kids. So that's from somewhere on the internet, right? So I'm looking at the nature of success. Even if you look amongst yourselves, you're displaying in this setting behavior that would be considered successful, even if you're eating, right? You're eating in a certain way, right? Even if you're drinking, right? As you're standing, whether you're, every indicator, all that we do it in order to be full participants in this setting, right? But nevertheless, what happens in relationship to young children, especially young children who are learning the language, we define them as not successful. Remember, I was coming in at the beginning of the year, probably the third week of the school year, and the teacher never hesitated to tell me who the slow one was. She never used that language, right? Because obviously it would not be correct for us to be able to say it. But in the third week of that year, she identified this one kid. Because this is part of my research, the names, the pseudonyms that I used for the kids were the successful one, her name was, and I'm pronouncing it in Spanish, Ivet, and the less successful kid was Paco, right? So Paco and Ivet were in the same setting, received supposedly the same instruction, but nevertheless the outcomes were differential, right? The other thing that I should note, that even though it's kindergarten, they're about 5 years old at the beginning of the school year, the fact that they are who they are is a consequence of 5 years of socialization, right? Those things that went on with them. So let me walk you through the research as I did it in this article. I could also send you, because it's fairly close to being done, the article as a whole. The problem that I'm having is that under most publication guidelines, it's too many pages because it's huge, the article. So it's almost like at one point I split it up into 2 articles and then it didn't work because it was disjointed, right? So I'm trying to figure out, I need to find a place where they all take like 9,000 words, which is not typical of an article, right? So I started with the notion of success and what I talked about, right? That we all do things to be able to display this notion of success, right? What makes us successful, right? I call them binary opposites, right? In every single setting, there are behaviors, expectations, ways of being that makes us successful or not, right? The opposite being failure, right? I have, because I've been here at the university for a little while, I have even heard it among students when they don't know about somebody else, they'll describe them. And I have even heard things like, well, she's the smart one who sits in the corner, right? And everyone knows who it is, even though they may not know the names. Or they may say, well, she's the one who has challenges, right? And they may be able to know who they are, even if they don't know their names. Let me go on into my research questions. I had a couple of questions. So I'm looking at what is the nature of classroom event in which school-related success is mitigated or displayed. And I think mitigation and displaying of success, in other words, how do you become, right? I could give you, a lot of times in my class I use myself as an example because I don't offend anyone, right? So I dressed up today because this is evidence of me being able to be successful in doing this brown. But normally, I would not dress up the way I'm dressed, right? Because we're trying to display, this is evidence of success. Another evidence of success is I was ready with my handouts so that there would be enough. And I probably made more than what I would expect so that I wouldn't run out, because running out would be evidence of not success, right? Of failure, right? My second question, how are individual children's success in school constructed through various frames, right? The various frames would be in the home setting, in the playground, in going over to the office, right? I was in a classroom this morning, and this kid was asked to make an inference, and he went off to left field. Going off to left field when making an inference is evidence of non-success, right? Of failure, right? And everyone knew it. There was even this sort of gurgling, like, can we, what do I do, right? And the teachers in charge really held back because they didn't want to offend the kid. And then issues of race kicked in because in this morning's observation, this kid happened to be an African-American male. And so are we going to say something that may reflect in terms of who he is as a black male in third grade, right? And I think we're careful, right? So we're looking at different contexts, different frames, such as classroom activities, such as parent journals, family conferences, institutional mandates, and peer control context, right? The peer control context is critical in every setting, right? In our multiple subject programs, in our credential programs, we place, in this program, in the doctoral program, we place individuals in cohorts because the peer control context helps one be successful so long, and you're assuming all kinds of things because you could also have the cohort from health, and both as faculty, as administrators, as a member of the peer, you're going to have a year from health if you're in those kinds of cohorts. So I'm looking at multiple things, right? And doing, I've studied with this, well, he is famous, a famous anthropologist by the name of John Ogbu. And John Ogbu said he was an old school ethnographer. And an old school ethnographer, you go in there, you get your notebook, and you're asking questions, and you're doing a lot of observations. In ethnographic research, you have to have a balance between sort of what is known as being a participant and being an observer, right? You can't have too much of one or the other, right? You need to be able to become a native without being a native itself. I should tell you the example that John Ogbu gave, and that is that years ago, in the 60s, when he started to teach as a professor of anthropology, he had a doctoral student who was fascinated by the Igbo tribe in Africa, Igbo, I-B-O. And so she went on and collected data and would come back to the university after a few months. But then one day she went and never came back. She married one of the natives. No. So Ogbu would say, that's not good anthropology, because you want to get the native's point of view, but not become a native, right? So I was trying to get the native's point of view without being a native. And so I was looking at all kinds of things within the community and building a relationship, right? A lot of times in building a relationship, you just have to hang out. Hanging out is the first principle in ethnographic research, is being there. And then you start asking questions. Because if you come in there and start asking questions, people will go back, right? In different ways, right? So rather than me getting into the methodology, although I did a little bit of that, let me go into some of the findings, what I found at the end of that year through the different contexts, through the different settings. What is the nature of success? How is it mitigated or displayed across multiple contexts, right? And I think that's the crux of what I want to do with you today, right? So one thing that I found, and I see it with me here at the university, success is related to the kind of relationships that the students had with the teacher. I see it here. I see it most poignantly, and I think Dr. Lilly, Dr. Heelig can attest to that from the doctoral faculty, because we spent a lot of time, actual time, with our doctoral students, and so the relationship, and I'm sure, for example, Dr. Lilly has an advisee who just completed her defense, and I'm sure he'll have angst over sort of commencing, because the student may be commencing, but we're also commencing because we are no longer going to see them after spending a lot of time working with them, right? So success is related to the kinds of relationships, right? Linda's relationship with Linda happens to be the pseudonym for the teacher that was working with both of the kids. Her relationship with the successful child was completely different. What she knew about the successful child, she could go on forever. And all of a sudden, as I was asking her about things that went on, I had like three separate instances where I interviewed her. The first two early on and in the middle of the year were sort of open-ended because I didn't want to give anything away because I wanted to be through the end of the year. She went on and talked about the kids in different ways, right? In terms of the successful of the kids, as she was talking, she would say, if we're talking about family life, both of them are unique. And she knew that they had a tragic family history, because they were in a low socioeconomic setting. Both kids were the children of undocumented parents, and so they were both also being raised by a single mom, right? So it was real difficult to be able to see those kids, right? So both of them had a tragic lives, their teachers said. Yvette, the successful child, she asked the teacher, her mother's also undocumented. They went on a vacation to where they're from, to Irapuato. Yvette and her brothers were able to come back because they do have their papers, but Yvette's mother wasn't able to make it right back, and her father's in jail, right? I think as a teacher, it's difficult to listen when the kids want to tell you, because they will tell you, especially kindergarten, and first they will tell you everything. And I think it's difficult. So Yvette's mom couldn't come back. Paco, the less successful kid, Paco's mother was obliged to travel to Mexico for this operation because she did not have available medical care. And she had to come back through the border crossing. It's probably right now, I think, about $10,000 to be crossed over by a coyote. A coyote is a person who does that, brings people over, right? That's a lot of money. Yeah. And so I think that's the current going rate in 2016. Both were in a depressed state, and I think that was true. You could tell as they were coming to drop off their kids at the beginning of the morning, right? So if we think further about success, Linda defines success as a change from the beginning to the end of the school year, right? So that something happens from the beginning to the end of the school year. Linda identified Yvette as a successful student and Paco as a less successful student. When I started to write the article, I had a difficult time with what do you call non-success, right? Do I want to call it failure, right? And I think that even though I'm using a binary opposite, I don't think it's as simple as just saying you're successful, right? Like when I sat in an IEP meeting and someone says, well, there's nothing, when you ask the teacher, well, tell me one good thing that this kid does. And they stare at you forever. And I don't understand that, because even if, let's say, you're sitting there for a long time and trying to pretend that you're picking up on what's going on, I think that's successful, right? So I think even though we look at success as the sum of certain qualities that are displayed that make someone successful, I think it's more intricate than that. And the same thing with failure, right? And I see it with English language learners. Because a lot of times, there's a lot of newcomers in the schools, and as I'm looking at them sitting in, let's say at the high school level, the teacher says, I don't know what to do. because they don't know nothing, which is not true, right? They define them as completely unsuccessful, given the fact that they don't speak, they speak a different language, right? Another element of success were the stories that the teacher, Linda, told about the kids. I mentioned already that she could go on and on about the successful kid. And she had a hard time saying much in reference to the less successful kid. Linda has a close relationship with the successful child. She sits next to her during different activities. Because I was allowed to take video, you could see the successful child always near Linda, always hovering. And it seemed natural. Unless you were looking for it, you probably could not identify it, right? Yvette got the keys, right? So I have a research assistant here, and she gets my keys too, and I don't worry about it, right? Whereas there are maybe other students who say, well, you know, my keys, I have my office, especially if it's late at night, and I don't have keys. I'm in trouble, right? Then I'm going to have to figure out how to get there, right? So Yvette got the keys, right? They would look at each other and smile. The successful child, right? She would call out on her. I remember there was an instance when the office needed something from the teacher, and she didn't even hesitate. She went over to Yvette and said, look, and at times, especially towards the end of the year, she just looked at Yvette, and Yvette read her mind. Asking for reference, right? It's another evidence of their relationship, right? So some of the transcript, Yvette asked, who says it? And then the teacher would say, Jessica. And then the teacher would say, do you like it? She's facing Yvette, and she affirms that she does like it. So it's not a lot of language, but it's that relationship where she connected with her, right? And that went on time and again. I was reading one of the students' research this week, and they were doing this kind of research, but they were not quantifying exactly how many instances, right? So as you look at the data, it happens time and again, consistently throughout the school year. So the metaphors as the relationship with the kids in terms of the less successful kid, this story is, and I'm translating it from the Spanish, which would be like a dummy. So as Linda's talking to Paco's mother, says, well, how is he doing? He says, oh, lo veo muy burrito. It's a loaded thing in Spanish. Some of you are bilingual and can attest to the fact, right? Oh, I see him as a little dummy. And the kid's standing right there. He's standing right there, just standing there being a nice, quiet little kid, right? Says nothing, right? Linda asks, she sees Paco, referring to Paco's mom, she sees him as very slow, and when she said that, she said it in front of him. And I don't know how much that helps, right? If you read between the lines, the teacher, even though she's talking at that point to me, as a researcher, she's also, I'm not sure if I could add the word complicitous, but she says it in a matter-of-fact way, rather than being appalled, rather than being upset over what the parent said, because this is her reality, this is their reality. This is what went on time and again. Another aspect of success was what I call sort of the extent of agency that the students had in the class. Agency means this, like we're in this setting. You have a lot of agency, if you would come up and let's say started to manipulate or play with the computer in this setting, right? You would have to have a lot of comfort with me, because right now I'm holding the floor, right? And in that setting, with this 5, then 6-year-old little kids, agency was displayed differently. Agency is what allows you to sort of stand and deliver. Remember that movie? I'm dating myself. But there was this, yeah. Thank you. So there was this movie that was called Stand and Deliver. In a sense, yeah. You do? Okay, you read it in history books? And anyways, so there was a different kind of agency. Event differentially displays an agentive comportment. A behavior that is agentive, right? So Yvette calls from Orlando. She motions to Orlando with her hand. Yvette asks, ven acá, come over here. Yvette says, as Orlando stands next to her, this was brown. They're looking at crayons. Remember, this is kindergarten, okay? So they're looking at crayons, the red, the blue, the brown. She suddenly mumbles, ay, me salió mal, right? So when she does it, she has a sense of herself as a learner, right? She's, you know, I would call them little Miss Know-It-All, right? When asked to test the microphone, and this refers to Paco. So whereas Yvette has all this agentive behavior, right? She knows it all, right? She knows this is what we're doing. This is the way we play school in this classroom, and I know as well. Paco, on the other hand, was that?
It's still her.
It's still like that.
Still her? Yeah.
He's on that.
Is this still her?
Yes.
Let me see.
She says,
Okay, so yeah, this is still her. I was jumping the gun because Paco did something different. So when Yvette is asked to test, because I literally was able to clip on a wireless microphone onto them, right? So when she says, hola, hola, I'm unable to pick up her voice through the camcorder. She says it again, this time in a more audible voice. Tony, who's a handful of energy, this other little kid, is sitting next to her bed. He screams, hola. Yet in 4 or 5 instances that she said, hola, Yvette never lost her composure. You know, you have this rambunctious sort of kid. Ooh, some of you are naughty because you have them in your classes. And he says, hola, and starts screaming, and then she's really composed. She knows exactly how to play school, right? So now we go into Paco, completely the opposite. Lila Whitfield cuts the first or 5 pieces for him. She literally, it's like, doesn't even assume, oh, this is Paco, let me go in there and begin cutting it for you, right? That's not non-agentive, right? Paco begins to cut without assistance. He seems captivated by the activity. His concentration seems solely on what he's doing. His concentration. Paco first cuts the square perimeter of his spy. He said he glances at the teacher and he moves back and forth as he moves back and forth. So there's this sort of passive, like, let the world pass before me. And it's obvious, right? The teacher asks the child, primero, first show me how you're going to cut it before you begin. Paco calls out to the teacher, maestra, maestra. Paco beckons the teacher for affirmation. He's waiting there. There's this passive behavior, right? Whereas she knows exactly what to do in every instance, right? So another aspect is the roles. Who gets to do what in the class? Who gets assigned what activity, right? And you can also see the difference, right? Yvette is given what I call teacherly roles. Things that a teacher would do. There's this kid, call him Daniel, who's a handful. The teacher tries to control him. And I remember one day vividly, Daniel is sitting next to Yvette, and the teacher wasn't in a good mood. And she just said, Yvette, take care of him. And she does. She does, while completing her work, her schoolwork. Ivet, make sure that Daniel doesn't get up again. And if you read I have transcripts where she repeatedly points non-verbally, like, do it, like, and he's crying and he's falling apart. And Ivet is working, never stops working. And you see it clearly time and again. She's given sort of this example. In contrast, Paco assumes passive roles. This is a sad story. Even when you go out to for recess, he needed someone. He could never, I never saw once him being able to go to the bathroom, which was across the ways where the teacher could see. He always needed to go with somebody. He would go stand next by the teacher and wait till the teacher saw him there, which sometimes could be a long time, and then somebody else had to take him. To get a drink of water during recess, he needed to be taken. Yes, because he could. There was nothing wrong with him walking over a few steps and getting a drink of water. But the roles that were expected from him within this setting had to be assigned.
He had learned his role.
He had learned his role. By the way, the same thing happened at home. When it was time to eat, he would sit at the table and wait sometimes for a long time because mother was tired. She came from spending 10 hours working, cleaning houses, and so he would sit there and wait and doodle and do all kinds of things. He was never misbehaving in any kind of way. But so let me conclude this. At the end, I asked that last interview the teacher what she thought about them, because they were going to go on to first grade. So I see Yvette doing very well, the teacher said. First of all, I would say that her personality is open to anything. She's not one who's afraid of anything. She would try anything. She doesn't have a bad attitude about anything. I should tell you this other story. In March of that year, Yvette fell apart. She lost it for about a month. And this is what happened. The day before, no, the week before, so she was absent for a week. She was never absent. She was always there at least 30 minutes before the bell rang. And so she was absent for a week and then came back. And she didn't look like herself. She just fell apart. But what happened the week before, that week when she was absent, she was left at the daycare till midnight because no one picked her up. And you know what happens to the kids? What are you supposed to do as administrator if a kid is not picked up from school? Who do you call? Well, no, you would call the police, right? Not CPS, because you would call the police. So they called the police picked her up after a while. By the way, she was there till midnight because they called the police around 7:30, 8 o'clock. And then they had to do paperwork, they had to call a social worker, a number of things, right? So finally at midnight she ended up leaving with the social worker because they couldn't contact anyone. And then finally the next day they contact her auntie. So what happened was that her mother was arrested by ICE, by the immigration, and she was deported back to Mexico. Now, I could tell you that there's schools in certain parts of the Southwest where they have protocols. The schools have protocols to take care of the kids when that happens, because it's happening a lot even now as we speak. So Yvette's mother was arrested, deported. The next day she was picked up by the auntie, And then a week later, she went back to school, and she fell apart, both her physical functions. She wasn't willing to control them. She would do all kinds of things. Never an emotional problem in terms of misbehaving, but she would just sit there, and instead of going to the bathroom, she would go on. You know. In any case, she fell apart completely emotionally. No work was done, right? Finally, the teacher was able to get all this done, and then she was absent a few days. A month went by, and the mother came back. Probably 48 hours after the mother came back, Ivet went back to her old self. So it goes back to the issue of resiliency, the resiliency needed for her to be able to do that. Paco, on the other hand, I think he went from bad to worse because he also, and one of the things that I don't mention about, because I think that's secondary, the issue of the learning outcomes. By the end of the year, all the, what is known as the basic kindergarten skills, Ivet knew them, had mastered them, and Paco probably knew 10 letters and inconsistently. Single digit addition, I don't think he had it. He could kind of write his name, but not well. What else with Paco? So I think there was that difference in terms of what we're looking at school, but also the behavior, the HSC, the relationship with the teachers. And then at the end, Linda's view of Paco's first grade was, I don't see him doing well. The fact that there are teachers that it depends on the teacher, and I think that's true.
Yeah.
It does depend on the teacher, right? Teachers are teachers here, as in any other school, who if they see him a little bit slow, a little bit beneath to what they believe is the standard, they kind of just push you to the back of the class and ignore you. I'm afraid for him that he would have one of those teachers, right? And I think at the end is the strategy. This is kindergarten, right? Remember, he's going to go to school for many more years, hopefully, right? Now, one of the things that we know is that even though some of the kids who end up so-called dropping out, even though they may drop out physically, months later, they drop out emotionally and academically way early, even as early as kindergarten, right? Because the so-called curriculum overload kicks in, and it becomes overwhelming. And then let me conclude with this. I think at the end you have to, the big idea that I'm trying to sort of affirm in relationship to these kids is that sort of learning and being successful and being smart is a social construct. It's artificial, it's fake, right? So how do we creatively sort of enact this idea that learning is a social construct, right? And I like this, although it's personal, because I think I see myself as both Paco and Ivet, me individually, in my own sort of educational autobiography, right? Because I think like Paco, he was quiet, withdrawn, removed, distant, right? He was a good little Mexican because he could sit there and pretend to be. But then when you saw what he was picking up, he wasn't picking up much. In part because much was not expected of him. In part because of the kind of relationships, right? I was giving feedback to my literacy group, and I mentioned in the notes that to remember the 3 R's: relationship, relevance, respect. And I think that there's a balance, right, between relationship, relevance, and respect. However, I also see Ivet, see myself as Ivet being a favorito, right? Praiseworthy by the teacher, right? And I think that's critical, right? And I think we as educators, we have to be able to be that. I was sitting in a defense recently focusing on this notion of culturally relevant pedagogy. And it was the one defending was an administrator, and I suggested we also have a culturally relevant leadership pedagogy, because we can't impose that. We can't say you will be relevant when I myself am not including those who are different than what I am. Let me stop there and see if you have any questions, comments. Yes?
I just got this, if you go back one slide. Okay, so we were just discussing. Okay, so I think there's some teachers, blah, blah, blah. She talks about the fact that he may get a teacher that just pushes him off to the side, and we were both like you did. So my question is I mean, or it's just a wondering, I just find it fascinating that some teachers don't see themselves as doing this, and yet they are doing this, right? So they're not even aware that they are shaping these children.
That's what.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's not just one child. I mean, the work I did in Virginia, this master teacher felt terrible for the teachers that the low track kids were getting. So she always taught. So I followed her to see, because she did excellent things with her honors class. And I thought, I can't wait to see her, how she, there has to be some, manipulating to, and it was night and day. I mean, it was the same thing. So here we are in 2016, and this was 1997. And you can walk into a number of classrooms and still see.
Yeah, part of, I think this teacher has changed, because she said, I didn't know that I was doing that. Even though this teacher is a bleeding heart educator.
But did you have a conversation kind of to unpack this with her?
Eventually, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Because see, I think that's where the
So
help
part
comes
of it is because in a sense, I'm reinterpreting what went on through a different lens. And I think a lot of times, if you change the lens, you change what you see. And I think that's helpful in different ways. Yeah, thank you. Other questions that you may have?
How long ago was this?
Probably 5-6 years ago.
So Paco would be in
Middle school.
getting close. Because it makes you wonder how he's taught.
Yeah, and I think it's hard. But I think there's all kinds of issues embedded within other issues. And, thank you for kind of...
Oh, that was wonderful. Look forward to your finally getting your, you might just have to write a book.
Probably. I
mean, really.
Yeah, because it's too many words.
No,
Would be okay, we would read it.
then you could even expand, because when you talk about success and failure and usage, you didn't get into the academics stuff, but it does translate
Correct.
into that. Because she would, that's probably going to do well on tests. And Paco's not, so here it's just that.
And yet it's not necessarily attributed to a lack of cognition or ability, right?
I was curious if you got any feedback from the teacher regarding having any kind of incentive to try and undo the demeaning language of the parent in the classroom setting. So she knows that.
I think she did comment several times. I could tell you I did comment. So I did, even though the parents were not necessarily the focal aspect of my research, I did pull her aside and I said, look, señora, in good Mexican Spanish, what you're doing. But it's difficult because some of the parents have low formal education, minimal formal education. Yeah. And I think part of it, she said it with a bit of frustration because she said, look, I wanted to have this kid and this is what I got. Yeah. I think it's let me call it this, it's a middle class U.S. value to be able to appreciate that we all have different sort of skills. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.